welcome to ShakeTube episode 6. Again, we are looking at a play that defies classification. It is technically a comedy, but has a healthy splash of the dramatic, and that play today is The Merchant of Venice. I very much enjoyed the play, but that doesn't mean that I don't have some conflicted feelings overall. On one hand, Shakespeare wrote one of his most badass women in Portia, which is great progress, and he also had a great, well-loved guy in Antonio. But on the other hand, he gets into some really murky water with some seemingly anti-Semitic themes. This part of the play was exceedingly difficult to analyze. I could see where Shakespeare could have been writing Shylock as a sympathetic character. I mean, he was justified in a lot of his anger, and he stated why he was so bitter toward a lot of the other characters. I mean, just look at the language that they all use when they talk to him, and look at how they treat him overall. But, you know, you just get to certain points of the play where Shylock does have some really sympathetic moments. In fact, I want to read one passage in particular. It's really famous. It's everywhere. I ended up putting a little dog ear on this, but I want to read the whole thing just to really highlight the fact that Shylock has moments where he's not this all-encompassing evil. This speech comes when Shylock is asked what good Antonio's flesh will do if he doesn't pay his debts, and there's a bit of a conversation, and then it gets into this. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. He hath disgraced me and hindered me 500,000, laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, heated mine enemies, and what's his reason? I am a Jew. Hath not a Jew eyes? Hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions, fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, held by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a Christian is? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? If we are not like you in the rest, we will resemble you in that. If a Jew wrong a Christian, what is his humility? Revenge. If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be by Christian example? Why, revenge. The villainy you teach me I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction. I mean, come on. How could you not read that and feel some sympathy towards Shylock overall? All the same, Shylock is still the main antagonist and is forced at the end to convert to Christianity. So what does that say about Judaism as a whole in this play? If that's the way that he ends up getting some redemption at the end, doesn't that kind of put a negative light on Judaism overall? I mean, hell, the play was enough of an indictment on Judaism that after the Night of the Broken Glass, Kristallnacht, in Nazi Germany, the Nazis actually broadcast this play on the German airwaves as a way to use it for propaganda purposes. They felt that Shylock embodied all of the traits that they felt were justifications for them to go ahead and pursue this terrible form of government, this terrible oppression against the Jewish people. They felt like all of that was really present in The Merchant of Venice, and I think that that says a lot regardless of what the actual intentions were for that character. The fact that it could be spun in that way is pretty telling. This plotline really does have some relation to England at the time. I found that Jews were actually expelled by Edward I in 1290, and they came back in 1656. There was actually evidence that in Venice, Jews had to wear red hats to signify that they were actually Jewish. It was something that was important enough to the people that they wanted to single them out. And so with that being the political climate and this play being written in the late 1500s again, this was, by some predictions, said to be written mid-1590s to late 1590s like we've had with a lot of the other plays, but obviously that ties in a lot there. And so, again, I don't know what he was really trying to do with having Shylock have these moments where he is a sympathetic character, but there is a lot of evidence that points towards that anti-Semitism, and it's just pretty unfortunate that that was the way that it went at that time. But luckily, with speeches like the one that I read, there's enough material to work with to reinterpret this play to continue to make Shylock more of a sympathetic character overall, and they won't have to portray him as a monster. And so that was something that was really on my mind throughout the entire reading of The Merchant of Venice, and it really raised that final question: is Shylock a bad guy because he is a Jew, or is he just a bad guy and a Jew? Both could be argued, and I know that there are a few critical essays out there that I am more than willing to read now because I found his character to be so fascinating overall. Even though there were a lot of great characters in The Merchant of Venice as a whole, I just kept finding myself gravitating back toward his character. And so I'm curious to hear what you all thought of Shylock and what you thought of that idea while you were reading The Merchant of Venice. But moving into a few quick things that I really liked about the play, I enjoyed the game show-like structure of the casket choosing for Portia. I just thought it was so funny that each person that came in to choose one got this whole long monologue. And I've talked about certain character roles that would be so great to have, like with Queen Margaret in Richard III, where she gets to have just a few lines to have a really big impact on the play. I think that any of the suitors that had to choose one of the caskets and ended up not choosing the right one, those would be considered some of the worst roles you could get in anything on stage, because not only were they not that impactful as a character overall because they chose the wrong casket and they were gone after that, but they had these exceedingly long monologues where they had to learn these lines and didn't have any cues from anybody else. And so I bet that would just be hell for whatever actor had to first run that scene. And so I just thought that that was pretty funny, and I just liked the structure that there were these riddles involved, and it kept moving back to different perspectives to bring you back to this casket choosing that eventually moved the plot on to reach its final conclusion. And despite some of those questionable quarrels with Shylock, I just loved Antonio. He was this overall great guy. Everybody loved him. He had just so many moments where you couldn't help but just be like, what a dude. And there was one moment in particular that I just chuckled to myself. It was after Antonio had learned that his ships had wrecked, and he had to send a letter to Bassanio. There was a particular passage that just solidified the fact that he is really caring, but also cares about other people more than himself. So let me read that real quick. So Bassanio reads the letter here, and it says, "Sweet Bassanio, my ships have all miscarried. My creditors grow cruel. My estate is very low. My bond to the Jew is forfeit, and since in paying it, it is impossible I should live, all debts are cleared between you and I, if I might but see you at my death. Notwithstanding, use your pleasure. If your love do not persuade you to come, let not my letter." And basically, he's just saying, I would love to see you at my death. Obviously, the debts are going to be cleared either way, but he basically at the end is just like, but do what you want. Like, I love you all the same, even though I really want to see you. Just do whatever feels right to you, man. And I was just like, what a total bro. He would be so awesome to have as a friend. And that got solidified time and time again throughout the whole thing. And he really reminded me of George Bailey. For those of you that don't understand the reference, that's from It's a Wonderful Life. And there's a similar storyline there where George Bailey at the end, he's been a great guy to everybody throughout the entire movie. And he ends up hitting a really hard time, and he is totally in debt. And then at the end of the movie, when all seems lost and he thinks that life is meaningless, everybody that he's ever helped came to his aid and made it all right in the end. They all put their money together, even though it was during the Depression and money was tight, and they just made the entire story this really happy ending after going through a really dark period there. And so Antonio just reminded me a lot of George Bailey because he was just good to everybody, and then at the end they all wanted to help him, and in the end it ended up working out in his favor. So overall, the complex characters in the story just gave me a lot to think about, and I appreciated that it didn't get into any fantastical territory. I know I did enjoy a lot of that in A Midsummer Night's Dream, but I like that it was grounded in reality, and it was really these interactions between people. It didn't have to be anybody killing anybody else to get to these big climaxes. It was just how people interacted with one another. So that's why I really liked The Merchant of Venice overall. And again, I really want to read more critical essays because I think that this story goes a lot deeper than a lot of the other plays that we have read so far. Especially, again, referencing A Midsummer Night's Dream, there was a lot that was really great about it, but to me it seemed very surface level, and with The Merchant of Venice, it seems to go a lot deeper than that, and there's so much more you can dissect, and there's a lot more of an ambiguous nature there, where you could have different interpretations for a lot of the different characters, and I think that that will make this week's discussion really fun. What did you think of The Merchant of Venice? Did you like it? Did you feel the same way that I did? Do you disagree with anything? I'd love to hear it below. Next week, it looks like we will be looking at Much Ado About Nothing, which I haven't read before, so I'm excited to have that. I ordered the next 2 plays after that, so they'll be arriving sometime this weekend. But yeah, we are officially in the second third of ShakeTube now. So good luck to everybody going forward, and I'll see you again next week. See ya.